finally, they're gonna add USB-C to the iPhone. This means that we can take one cable on trips to charge everything, we can get faster data transfer speeds, we can get faster charging. This is gonna be so much better. Yeah, okay, but what if there's a port better than USB-C in the future that Apple wants to adopt, but they can't because the EU forced them to use Type-C? Well, let me ask you something. Has Apple come up with a faster, better charge port for the iPhone? Well, you know, Lightning was really ahead of its time. It was quite good. You know, they came up with Lightning 3.0, right? And they chose not to use it on the iPhone? Well, yeah, okay, but what if in the future they come up with Lightning 4.0 and they want to roll that out? Why would they roll out Lightning 4.0 if they don't even feel like rolling out Lightning 3.0? Okay, listen, I just don't think governments should stifle innovation, all right? What innovation? They've literally done nothing. The government is forcing Apple to adopt a better standard that allows for more features and better connectivity than before. Yeah, but I mean, if we would have waited another 10 years, maybe Apple would have come up with something better. They did come up with something better. It's called Type-C. They're just not using it for some stupid reason, and now the government's forcing them. La 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 la, Lightning's better. We can go portless anyway. Doesn't matter. All right. Sounds reasonable. Let's begin. So the bill that we've been talking about for many, many years now that got put on hold back in 2018 has now officially been passed into law by the European Union, which is a very large market for Apple in the iPhone. They're now saying by the end of 2024, devices that use a port must adopt USB-C as the standard, and basically this whole law is specifically made for Apple. I don't think there's that many other companies that were causing that much complication in the USB-C world, and it does apply to new hardware. So the way I interpret that means that if Apple wants to continue selling older iPhones with Lightning, I think they'll be able to. And based on the wording they're choosing in the EU law, it sounds like Apple could technically have an out if they went down the portless route. But for the record, I still think that's a terrible idea because, for one, it would create an insane amount of e-waste. And Apple's already argued as to why they care about e-waste and they want to limit that if at all possible. So if they did go the portless route, suddenly you'd have all these Lightning accessories and Lightning cables that are all completely useless because there's not an easy way to convert every Lightning cable into a MagSafe charge puck. Not to mention, MagSafe is less efficient. That means all charging would have far more losses, more heat wasted, and yes, smartphones are not a huge strain on the grid, I know that, but as Apple is now rolling out like clean energy charging features to iOS, I feel like it would be quite hypocritical of them to just say the only way to charge your iPhone now is inductively, even if we really like MagSafe. It still technically makes it a bit more awkward to use the phone while it's charging. It instantly makes a bunch of CarPlay accessories not work anymore, whereas you can easily mass roll out lots of Lightning to USB-C accessories, similar to Apple shipping Lightning to headphone jack adapters when they ditched the headphone jack. And the other difference is USB-C is so insanely widespread, it's very likely people already have USB-C cables at home, either from the Android phone they're switching from, or their iPad, or their Mac. USB-C cables are plentiful across the world, so that's why I don't think switching to Type-C would cause nearly as much e-waste as it does if we were to ditch the port entirely. Plus, factory resets and hard restores that people want to do through iPhones would become a lot more complicated. And from a pure marketing standpoint, there's all kinds of advantages to switching to Type-C. Apple can boast about how the new iPhone 15 has much faster charging and much faster data transfer speeds. Heck, if they want to say we waited because we wanted to get USB-C right on the iPhone, they could give it all out Thunderbolt. That way you can transfer your high-resolution ProRes files off of the iPhone much faster than AirDrop or the stupid USB 2.0 speeds that Lightning is still stuck at, especially in the future when iPhone cameras are likely going to start recording ProRes at 4K at 60, or if they do eventually make that jump to 8K video recording, all of that higher bitrate data that Apple is now upselling people with on 1 terabyte iPhones, it would make sense to have a port on that phone to easily get large files off of it, and Lightning's just not really good at that. So I see removing the port as being this big controversial decision that would just tick a bunch of people off, whereas switching to Type-C would be a giant crowd pleaser that I think would get a lot of people excited. And if you're the type of person that just says, well, I wish they would just keep Lightning, EU is not allowing that anymore. So the likelihood of Apple just removing the port or switching to Type-C on the European Union iPhones, but keeping Lightning or keeping the port on everybody else's iPhone, I think think is just going to be far too complicated. It's already weird enough that they're doing that with the SIM tray things. If they take it a step further with the port, I just think that it's going to complicate manufacturing too much. And even Phil Schiller, when they unveiled Lightning, said that Lightning was going to be the connector for the next decade. And we've just now passed the 10-year mark of Lightning because it was first introduced in 2012. Why not then? Wouldn't it be perfect to introduce Type-C on the iPhone in 2023? And the interesting part about the EU law is it's enforcing it not just on phones, but on keyboards and mice, which does mean that if they want to keep selling their own Magic Keyboard accessories and mice in the European Union, those are either going to have to switch to Type-C or go portless. Same thing with AirPods, same thing with the Siri remote, which honestly, because AirPods are much smaller and they're not handling large file sizes being transferred back and forth, and all of the communication with the individual pods, which are what have the H1 or H2 chips in them, is being done wirelessly. I feel like AirPods could go the portless route and it wouldn't be that big of a deal, because ultimately now, we know with AirPods Pro 2, you can charge them via the same puck as the Apple Watch charger. The Apple Watch is not required to adopt USB-C. There are exemptions in the law for things like that. And because of how small the AirPods case is, I feel like if we ditched the Lightning port in there, you would free up a lot of space for added battery life, which would be a big win. Whereas in the iPhone, with the size they are, I don't think you would get that much battery life out of it by going portless. But ultimately, I'm just interested in seeing if Apple will switch to Type-C on the Magic Mouse and the Magic Keyboard, or are they going to try to switch those to MagSafe, or maybe they bring MagSafe to the mouse and USB-C to the keyboard, but it never made sense to me to have Lightning on those Mac accessories in the first place. The Mac adopted USB-C very early on, like March of 2015, Apple adopted USB-C on the MacBook, so this is not like we're forcing Apple to switch to a port that they've never heard of. Apple's been shipping products with USB-C for over 7 years, and I think it's crazy that we had to wait for the European Union to pass a law in order for them to unify the lineup and just have a single port across all of their products, instead of us having to constantly think, oh wait, this is my iPhone charger, this is my iPad charger, this is my Mac charger, this is my iPhone charger. Doesn't need to be this complicated, and it's not just a nerdy tech spec thing. Everyday consumers run into this dilemma a lot too. The classic example I always run into with my wife is we'd have a charger for my iPad and then we'd have a charger for her phone, and sometimes if her iPhone battery was low, she would grab the iPad charger and try to plug it in. I'd be like, sorry honey, even though that cable was, yes, made to charge the iPad and it's also made by Apple, that's the wrong cable for your phone. Plus, Lightning cables are not bilateral. It's always been Lightning on one end and then something else on the other end, whether it's USB-A or USB-C, whereas the great perk of Type-C is that it doesn't really matter which end of the cable plugs into which device. Power and data is transferred. I think this will simplify packing and it will simplify transitioning from people coming over to Android, and come with its own fair share of advantages. It's the easiest way to reduce e-waste as well, because the adapter can easily convert any Lightning accessory into a USB-C accessory, which in return makes it work with iPads or Macs if you want it to. So to me, the positives are endless, and the negatives of going portless are honestly reasons for people to not upgrade their iPhone. They'll feel like, why would I get that one? It's gonna make it harder for me to charge my phone or use it with the accessories I'm used to. So I get the precedent that people are mad that a government is enforcing something, but honestly, this is something that I feel like Apple needed to be forced on, because they had been keeping the Lightning 2.0 port speeds around for way too long, and your argument would make sense about like, well, what if there's a better port in the future? What if there's a better design in the future? Yeah, if there is, Apple's not adopting it, because there's been a better port for the past 7 years, and Apple didn't want to switch to it in the first place. They seem to like complacency, at least when it comes to the iPhone port. They like to just hold on to what's been there. Doesn't matter if it's slower or more dated than USB-C. They just want to keep it on there because I guess that's what people are used to. So personally, I think there's plenty of overhead built into this port that could easily last us several decades. You know, a smartphone can only get batteries in it so big. I don't think that 100 watts is going to fundamentally limit how good phones can be. It's not like, well, if we switch to MagSafe 3 on the iPhone, then we could get 140 watt charging. Yeah, Apple can barely handle 30 watt charging as is. And in terms of data transfer speeds, you guys have been complacent and totally fine with Apple having USB 2.0 speeds, whereas the USB-C port theoretically could support up to 80 gigabits per second, which I don't know anybody that needs that on a phone. But even in the future, we could technically have speeds that insanely fast on a phone. Is there theoretically some other port design that we might want to adopt on a phone in the future that could handle 100 gigabits per second? Yeah, I don't think we're going to run into that problem for a good long while, and frankly, I think USB-C could probably be pushed further if we wanted it to be. So I'm not convinced that USB Type D is around the corner and that's going to be way better, because because smartphones are not hitting the limits of what the Type-C port can offer, and I'm really hoping this means that Apple starts this transition next year. Kuo and Gurman have talked about there being USB-C prototypes in the works, but technically, because Apple has till the end of 2024, they might push it to the iPhone 16, but I just think that's a bad idea. Another year of dynamic islands with lightning ports and somewhat big cameras is just not going to be a big upgrade for people, whereas I think if they adopt USB-C next year, that's probably going to be the biggest headlining feature, is like, finally, the iPhone makes the switch, and iPads, Macs, phones, they can all charge off of the same cable. Anything else exciting to report with the iPhone 15 lineup? It'll be like, oh, yeah, maybe the zoom is a little better on one specific version of the iPhone, but the rest of the lineup, yeah, mostly the same. So please, Apple, don't overthink this. Don't screw this up. Just switch to Type-C next year and bring it along with your AirPods switching over, the TV remotes, the keyboards, the mice. The Lightning port served its purpose. It's done now. Put it to rest. Don't try to overthink this. There's a simple solution. You can do it. I trust you. Let me know your thoughts on the EU law down in the comments below. This is your Apple Sheep here, and I'll see you all in the next one.